During the G20 summit, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva emphasized the importance of a more proactive stance by wealthy nations regarding climate neutrality goals. Lula criticized the slow progress of these countries in making concrete commitments to address the climate crisis, highlighting that their historical responsibilities cannot be ignored. He stressed that developed countries have a historical debt to the environment, as they are the main contributors to greenhouse gas emissions over the centuries. According to Lula, without demonstrating commitment and leadership, wealthy nations lose credibility when demanding more ambitious measures from developing countries. The speech reinforces the idea that climate justice should guide global discussions. Developing countries, often the most vulnerable to the consequences of climate change, need financial and technological support to implement effective actions. Lula argued that only through cooperation and equitable actions can the global goals for climate neutrality be achieved, which are essential to limit global warming. This stance by the Brazilian president reflects the view that the transition to a sustainable economy must be a collective and fair effort, where each nation contributes in proportion to its historical responsibility and current capacity. G20, Global Alliance Against Poverty. The G20, a forum that brings together the world's largest economies, plays a crucial role in combating global poverty. Through coordinated policies and multilateral initiatives, the member countries can promote effective actions to reduce inequalities and ensure better living conditions for billions of people worldwide. The Global Alliance Against Poverty emerges as a proposal to unite efforts in key areas such as education and professional training, ensuring universal access and preparing individuals for the challenges of the labor market. Public health, with investments in infrastructure, affordable medications, and combating endemic diseases. Food security, promoting sustainable agricultural technologies and access to basic food supplies. Innovation and infrastructure, boosting local economies through investments that generate jobs and foster sustainable development. Furthermore, the alliance recognizes the need to address inequalities between wealthy and developing nations by promoting technology transfers, financial cooperation, and strategies to alleviate the burden of external debt on poorer countries. The commitment to eradicating poverty is not only a matter of social justice but also a way to ensure global stability, strengthening peace and international security. The G20, representing 85% of the world's GDP, has the resources and influence necessary to lead this historic change, turning speeches into concrete actions and lasting results. The Global Alliance Against Poverty is an essential step toward building a more equitable and sustainable future where no one is left behind. G20, the power of Brazilian diplomacy. Brazil's participation in the G20 highlights the strategic role the country plays in building bridges and strengthening global dialogue. Renowned for its multilateral and conciliatory approach, Brazilian diplomacy has proven to be an indispensable force in international negotiations, seeking solutions that promote inclusion, sustainable development, and social justice. Within the G20, Brazil leverages its privileged position as a leader among emerging economies to advocate for the interests of the Global South, ensuring that the needs of developing nations are heard and prioritized in global discussions. Promote climate justice, emphasizing the importance of equitable measures to tackle climate change, with shared but differentiated responsibilities. Strengthen fair international trade, combating protectionism and fostering agreements that benefit all nations. Boost global cooperation, proposing initiatives to address crises such as food insecurity, social inequalities, and public health challenges. Brazilian leadership is also reflected in its ability to balance divergent interests, acting as a mediator between advanced and emerging economies. This approach fosters constructive dialogue, where all stakeholders feel represented, creating broader and more effective solutions. The G20 is not only a space for economic power but also a platform for collaborative diplomacy. Brazil, with its tradition of fostering consensus, underscores the importance of dialogue as a tool to address global challenges. Brazilian diplomacy at the G20 reaffirms the country's commitment to being an active and reliable voice on the international stage, building bridges that bring nations closer and paving the way for a more inclusive, balanced, and sustainable future. Closing of the G20 in Rio de Janeiro, a milestone of hope and global action. The G20, held for the first time in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, concluded with highly positive outcomes, reinforcing the importance of multilateral dialogue in a world facing increasing challenges. Throughout the event, leaders from the world's largest economies and emerging nations consolidated significant commitments in key areas such as environmental sustainability, combating inequality, food security, technological innovation, and inclusive economic recovery. Expectations of transforming the G20 into a more representative and accessible forum were met through new discussions on climate justice and more equitable global cooperation. Under Brazil's leadership, the event highlighted the urgency of coordinated actions to address climate change and strengthen economic resilience in the most vulnerable countries. Among the achievements were concrete commitments to climate neutrality, including new deadlines and investments. The creation of a global fund to support developing nations, focusing on sustainable infrastructure and energy transition. The establishment of strategic partnerships to advance education and technology in underdeveloped regions. Recognition of global interdependence, reaffirming the importance of solidarity and cooperation among nations. The closing of the G20 in Brazil symbolizes not only the strengthening of Brazil's leadership on the international stage but also a decisive step toward a fairer and more sustainable global governance. The leaders present emphasized the necessity of a global ethic of coexistence, acknowledging that the challenges of the 21st century can only be overcome through united efforts. As a final message, the collective commitment to a more humane and transformative future resonated. We must trust that human potential is limitless, that the dynamism of change is invincible when conscious people unite and act hand in hand. The humanity of the 21st century has the mission to prove this truth.